Welcome back. You are watching Metropole Television. My name is Simbalaja Charles Kiage. This is your economic review where we tell you the biggest headlines that you are waking up to this morning. Now, let's get on to that first story. Well, the Kenya Revenue Authority KRA tax collection in July jumped to 121.8 billion compared to 94.4 billion over a similar period last year, with a figure comprising of a tax revenue of 121.8 billion and non-tax revenue of 348.9 million. This has come days after tax experts in Kenya raised queries over how the Kenya Revenue Authority's outstanding tax collection performance in a struggling economy when it announced that it had overturned more than 31 billion, that's about $289.71 million dollars collection revenue deficit in less than 3 months in a COVID-19 ravaged economy to post a surplus for the 2020-2021 fiscal year, breaking an 8-year revenue underperformance trend. Now, the taxman has however stated that the tax collection figure was largely boosted by enforcement measures that saw a massive 93.7 billion generated during the 2020-2021 fiscal year, and the dispute resolution framework that netted 31.43 billion shillings in the same period. KRA also credits other revenue collections enhancement measures that included the voluntary disclosure program and amnesty for taxpayers that brought in 997 million in taxes from 138 taxpayers as of June 30th, 2021. And at 2020-2021, KRA collected 1.669 trillion compared to 1.607 trillion in the 2019-2020 financial year. The biggest headline is that for the very first time in 8 years, KRA has surpassed its collection targets. Let's look at this data this morning before we introduce the manager KRA policy and tax advisory to the conversation this morning. Now, you can see that trend is what we're talking about from 2019-2020 and then 2020-2021. A time when we all said that KRA were going to have a lot of problems collecting that figure, but seems like they were not deterred by that, because you could see that collection that jumped 2020 in 2020-2021 that got up to 1.669 trillion. Let's cross over and see that exchequer revenue trend all the way from 2015 to 2019-2020, and you can see how it was a bit of a challenge for KRA to land on those targets, which they've now landed on in 2020-2021. Now, let's see that composition of revenue in 2020-2021, and you could see exactly how a VAT, which was normally or has been normally the biggest contributor to their revenue, not really being that much, because you could see it's only accounted for 27%, income tax 45%, and excise duty at 16%, import duty at 8%. Now, some of this, as we do expect, are going to post gains again, some part in 2020 towards the end of 2021, because we do know that some of them measures the government had taken to cushion the economy from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic were reversed, and at 2021, that's why you will see the VAT and excise duty among those ones that are going to account for the biggest part of that income for KRA. Good. Let me introduce the panel that we have this morning. We do have Josh Onsando, who's the public policy analyst and the political strategist. Josh, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Happy to have you around. We are fine. Tommy Brendo, who's a policy analyst. Tommy, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Simba.
Fantastic to have you around. Let me introduce, you do know him, Mr. Cheriot, who's the manager, KRA Policy and Tax Advisory. Mr. Cheriot, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Simba.
Happy to have you around. Let me stick with you, Mr. Cheriot.
Yes, sir.
For the very first time in 8 years, and I know I spoke to you last year, you told me, yes, with some of the measures that you're putting in place, you are going to meet your target. You did not just meet it, you posted a surplus on that target, Mr. Cheriot. Can you paint a picture at a time when what has been originally your biggest quotas in net tax contribution were heavily affected, but you moved beyond that and posted that figure that we're talking about this morning? What is your comment on that, Mr. Cheriot, before we begin to talk about the basics on that figure?
You, Mr. The Revenue Authority has actually, for the first time in 8 years, as you have actually put it,
yes,
is that we have posted a surplus of over 16 billion Kenya shillings over the plan or over the target that was put to us by our treasury last year.
yes,
And this is mainly attributed to Kenya Revenue Authority's resilience. It is also contributed by the voluntary compliance by our taxpayers.
yes,
And at this point in time, I would like to congratulate and actually thank our taxpayers that despite the pandemic that we have really experienced, where the businesses has actually been low, that they have actually assisted us to comply with the tax laws.
yes.
For those people who have actually made profits, for those people who have transacted during the pandemic period, we thank you and we say congratulations for having assisted us to achieve that. And this is mainly attributed to not actually the issue of enforcement, but it is actually attributed, the contributions that we have actually made
Yes.
is actually driven by a number of factors that I would actually be able to enumerate as we go along.
Yes.
That it's compliance.
Yes.
That is the thing that our Kenyan populations, our Kenyan businessmen, our Kenyan employees are actually complying in actually coming up with the payment of taxes. And they have actually calculated that we have actually branded ourselves that if we want to be independent, tulipe ushuru ili tujitegemee. That is our clarion call. And
Yes.
we are actually calling upon Kenyans that we need not to over-rely on our foreign donors, but let us mobilize our own resources locally in order to move forward and actually develop our country.
Pretty much. Mr. Cheriot, let me stick with you because I want to bring in Tommy Rendo and Josh on Sunday this morning. But just before I bring them in, let's talk about that figure. I mean, 3 months to the end of the last financial year, we're talking about 2020, 2021. It looked as if, again, the headline that we were going to get from KRA is that we almost actually met that target. But then when you're saying that it's actually due to compliance,
Yes.
what does that say then? If actually KRA can meet that target in just 3 months, does it say that the level of compliance in the country when it comes to tax payments is quite low? If you could actually meet that target in just 3 months to the end of that financial year?
Okay, what I can say is that our compliance level at the moment is, okay, in the plan period, that is 2020,
Yes.
2020, 2021.
Yes.
Our compliance level in terms of those people who actually file their return, those people who are registered with Kenya Revenue Authority for the purpose of paying various taxes. The compliance level that we attained in terms of filing was actually 68%.
Yes.
Meaning that there is still another 32 out of 100% of our registered taxpayers, we actually attain a rate of 68% for those people who filed the returns in time.
Yes.
And for those who filed and made payment, we are actually buying at that shortfall of 12%. And you can see, for those people who actually filed their returns in time, we are talking about 68. That means we have around almost 32% of the population or all the taxpayers whom we have registered. And they have not filed, they didn't file their returns in time. Meaning that 32%, in fact, if all of them were, if we had actually attained 100% compliance rate, then we would not actually be talking about the surpluses that we have actually, which we actually posted of around over 16 billion.
Yes.
So 30% is actually a very large population. of our taxpayers who actually never file their returns in time. So these are now the people whom we are actually looking at. So in the next financial year, we are actually trying to move our compliance to around 70% for those people who will be filing their returns in time to 70%. And over, we know Kenya Revenue Authority has a 3-year plan.
Yes.
So and we have what we call an 8th corporate plan, which is running from 2021 up to 2023, 2024. So over the plan period, as far as compliance is concerned, we are looking at transforming or actually pushing up our compliance rate from 68% by 2023, 2024. We will be looking at a compliance rate of 80%. We know actually we will not be saying that every after taxpayer whom we have actually registered to pay their tax, to be paying their taxes, would actually be able to do so. But if we can be able to move our compliance level from the current up to 80%, then and also move our payment for those people who have actually filed their taxes and made payment, we want to move it to 93% over the plan period. So actually, we are actually trying to see that we improve our payment rate from the current 88% to 93%. So with that, we would actually be in a position to actually collect around 6.8 trillion over the plan in 3 years. So actually, these are quite a lot of measures that we are actually putting in place in order to realize that we move our compliance level from the current levels to the levels that I've already talked about. So probably I do not know when particular point, or I can be able to we would be able to goes with number of our the team of our plan period at the moment is that we cannot be able to sit back, as I have already told you, and actually wait for things to happen.
Yes.
But we have to plan. We actually realize we attain whatever the national treasury, or we attain actually supporting the government in actually mobilizing the resources. So actually our team during the plan period is actually saying that we are going to mobilize resources. We need to mobilize revenue resources by simplifications of our tax law.
Yes.
We also actually anchor in technology for realizing that, and at the same time to increase our tax base and be able to do, which of course I think I will be able to enumerate them later on what the strategies we have actually put in place. But our team is actually to mobilize resources by simplifications of our tax laws to make it as simple as possible in order to enhance compliance. And we are also going to use technology, because technology is the in thing. And thirdly, we are also going to bring on board a number of people who have actually who have the potential to pay the taxes, but at the moment we have not brought them into the taxes, and therefore the kind of people whom we are looking at.
Yes.
We have had over the period.
Mr. Cheviot, I'm sorry to cut you short. I don't mean to, because I know Josh and the Tommy Brendo actually wanted to also weigh in on this as well. I'm going to get back to you on that, on what the plans for 2021, 2022 are, and if indeed we are going to meet that biggest target that you have on your heads yet. Let me bring in Josh. Josh, when you look at the statistics and you hear exactly what Mr. Charles Cheviot is saying this morning, now let's look at that. They're saying, if you look at that figure, then you will see that under that tax collection figure that was largely boosted by enforcement measures, they got a massive 93.7 billion that was generated in 2020-2021 out of dispute resolution, that netted 31.43 billion under that same period as well. That amnesty program that KRA actually did extend for Kenyans within 2020-2021 managed to bring in 138 taxpayers who actually were able to give them about 997 million shillings. Josh, when you look at that figures, yes, we should celebrate that indeed now KRA is able to meet its targets, and we're moving closer and closer to realizing these figures that the National Treasury normally sets for KRA. But what does it tell you about that? It's litigation. tax compliance the way to go for KRA in bringing more Kenyans under the tax umbrella?
Thank you, Simba. I don't mean to be a bubble buster, but even as much as KRA is saying this is the first time they've met targets, and I'm sure Mr. Cheriot won't be happy to hear this,
yes,
first time in 8 years, the reality is that by the Treasury was coming up for the targets for this financial year, and because of COVID, the targets weren't moved up. So based on what KRA collected, if indeed we had moved the targets up as we normally do every year, then
yes,
KRA would not have met its targets. So they only met the targets because of the target revision because of COVID. That being said, I think yes, it's extremely important that that KRA focuses more on using the carrot rather than the stick. Clearly, the stick hasn't been working. And now that they are using the carrot, they're coming up with conflict resolution measures between them and the taxpayers. Then we're seeing actual results. Another thing I'd like to say is, you see, again, when KRA releases numbers, you have to take them at face value.
Yes.
And because we don't have any way of checking. So, for example, when they talk about the increase they've had in custom taxes, we know very well that the COVID-19 increase. So I'm glad that the alternative measures of collecting taxes rather than the normal stick of the fines that we're used to, and I'm glad that that is showing results. I'm a bit skeptical about the overall outlook.
That's the overall outlook. And Mr. Cheruiyot, because you're the center of a conversation this morning, I want you to get a quick response to that. But Joash, even as Mr. Cheruiyot gets ready to get a quick back to you on that, is it going by what we're seeing now? Because if you look at July, it's 121.8 billion in collections from KRA vis-a-vis 94.4 that they got last year, same period. Josh, it looks as if, yes, things are ticking finally in our office.
Yes, I mean, here's the thing, Chacha. Obviously, last year, I mean, we had them collecting minus the rebates we've been given through the stimulus package. So obviously this year is going to be better.
Yes.
Again, you have to notice that what normally happens in the private sector when you're recovering from financial crisis, such that you get this impetus to go back into business. So, for example, if I had an eatery, I closed last year. When I open, then I'm going to do some painting, I'm going to do renovation. So that back to business surge by the private sector could be what is impacting the positive collections by KRA again. So it could be partly the measures they're taking, and I agree with that. But we also have to realize that this year is a unique year because it's a recovery year, and every year typically people will pay more taxes because it costs more to recover.
Pretty much. Mr. Charles Cheruiyot, before I bring in a Tommy Brendel, you hear what Josh is saying. Yes, you're celebrating that you've hit your target, but then he's saying that your targets weren't really put that high because they were revised again because of the coronavirus pandemic. So he's saying, probably, yes, let's celebrate that you hit that figure, but then he's saying, but your figure or your target was a bit lower because of the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Cheruiyot, your quick response to that.
Thank you, Simba. Taxes is a function of the economic performance.
Yes.
We cannot be able to say that we are actually collecting from nowhere, but yes, it is the basis of our taxations, or even in terms of target setting, is actually a function of economic indicators, performances. And therefore, if we actually project that the economy is not going to perform, obviously we cannot be able to deride and actually deceive ourselves that we are actually going to down. If any authority impetus or trust in actually collecting or meeting targets action of the economy. So if the economy is not performing, then we will not also be expected to perform as much. But we would actually go along, take more measures, stringent measures in actually ensuring that all the loopholes that are there are actually covered.
Yes.
So in terms of to answer the issue or the question that has been put to me by Choas, is that yes, indeed, the target was actually revised, but it was revised also based on the economic outlook. How was our economy going to be?
Yes.
Because we find that our economy grew by almost 0.6%, which of course you can realize if the economic growth was actually 0.6%, but we were able to actually come up with our growth in terms of revenue was actually around 17%. So you can actually be able to see that despite the slowdown in our economic activities, we actually did perform by actually growing our revenues by around 17%.
Yes.
So this means actually the efforts that we are actually putting in place is actually bearing fruits. It is actually the resilience of the staff of Kenya Revenue Authority that they have actually called on out to actually sensitize and ensure that, as I've already said, it is only through compliance that actually we are able to realize. Even you can even see the issue of contribution from ADR, that is alternative dispute resolutions mechanism. That is an alternative where actually we are discussing with our taxpayers on any taxes. If they have tax liabilities, if they have disputes, we have raised assessments on them and we have disputes, we are able to negotiate, reach a negotiating table and agree on the way forward in order to ensure that rather than chasing them away and actually saying that we need to collect 100 billion from
Yes.
then we can be able to see their outlook, their economic activities, their ability to pay, their cash flows, and we say, come, we negotiate and we actually collect the revenues. So at the end of the day, come next year, these people will not be able to repeat the same problem. And the same thing that they have actually been doing through alternative methods, we are able to collect.
Pretty
And
much.
that is why we actually collected that 1 billion.
All right, Mr. Chibiot, let me also bring in a Tommy Brendel as well, because I know Tommy Brendel also has a say on that as well. Tommy Brendel, the question to you is this. You see the direction that we're taking, compliance, litigation. That has finally borne fruit for KRA. But Tommy Brendel, in terms of bringing more Kenyans under the tax bracket, is that the way to go, litigation and compliance?
I think compliance is very important, and a lot of people are falling in line because of threats. If you don't file your taxes before this time, there's a fine. You know, that is the stick that Josh was talking about. But also litigation is important because court cases define certain laws and make things easier for the next year around.
Yes.
So, like now, we've seen, like, I think Brookhouse was taken to court. We've had so many companies taken to court because of things that are not very well defined in law. And Mr. Cheriot alluded to that when he said that simplification of laws and making them more transparent and easily understandable makes tax collection a whole lot easier.
Yes.
Yes.
Pretty much. All right, Tommy Brendel, just before I let you go as well, let's look at the figure that we're talking about this morning, Tommy Brendel. As of July, KRA has already had 121.8 B in their account compared to 94.4 B where they were last year at a time like this. Last year, at a time like this, when we do know they've also surpassed their collection targets. Are we saying again for the very first time, or for the second time running as well, that KRA is going to meet their targets for this year as well, which we do know are the biggest one they have yet?
You know, there are certain things that they've done that should help them meet that target.
Yes.
Now, Josh is skeptical about these targets because they've been lowered because of the pandemic, and it's realistic.
Yes.
But now you see, they went and hired a whole lot more people. They've become a lot more active in litigation. So it is possible that they will meet their target, especially, and that's a good thing. If people are complying to their tax obligations, that's good for our nation. So whether you support the government of the day or not, because we know where the tax goes to. The tax is supposed to go to fund whatever government activities are going on. Whether you support the government of the day or not, it's good to see people fulfill their tax obligations. It's likely that they'll meet their target, especially because of the few policy changes that they've made, hiring a lot more people. Litigation helps, it does help. They go after the big fish and get a lot of money in one lump sum. So it's possible.
Pretty much. All right, let's cross over to Mr. Charles Chebuiot this morning as well before we close in that conversation with Josh. Mr. Chebuiot, let's look at the tax composition in 2020-2021 and then ask ourselves a question, are things back to normal in these specific quarters? Because under that, VAT, which has been your biggest contributor to that, only gave you 27%. Income tax was the one that withheld those contributions at 45%. Excise duty, 16%. Import duty, 8%. And the other revenue gave you 4%. And I would like to think that even litigation and all that is considered in the other parts of the revenue that give you 4%. So when you look at the way we've started this year, Mr. Chebuiot, and we're looking at July only, where you've surpassed last year to jump to 121.8 billion from 94.4 billion. Is this an indicator that indeed this year again, you're bound to meet your targets?
Thank you, Arati. It is our prayer that we actually, because it will be the joy of each and every Kenyan,
yes,
the government, Kenya Revenue Authority, that we meet our target. Because when we meet our target, we will be able, the government will be able to finance and actually reduce the issue of the budget deficit.
Yes.
So yes, indeed, we are actually very much optimistic, as you can be able to see that the contributions when it comes to the various forms of taxation, we are actually expected to find that the economy is going to rebound. You find last year, over the period last year, there were a lot of close downs in our economic. There was a lot of restrictions of movement because of COVID, but now the economy is actually opening up. You find even the other day, the minister in charge of transport actually announced that we are going to have full capacity for purposes of our, in terms of transportations, carriage of passengers, that we are going to have full capacity. And all along, they have actually been operating at around 50% or around 70% capacity, meaning that the more and more people are going to enter into the vehicles, and therefore we expect a lot of revenue from the transport industry, the transport sector, that it is going to increase in terms of the number of lines around. So we expect that the transportation sector is going to bring us more and more revenue. Now, when it comes to issues of income taxes, yes, we do expect, a number of industries actually closed down over last year, and now they are actually opening up, and you find now we'll actually be able to see that income taxes are going to be to be increased, because one thing is that we are also, the issue of the economic measures or the tax measures that were put in place by the minister over last year, the reductions in the rates of taxes from 30 to 25%. Now we have gone back to 30%, and therefore we expect through that increase in the rates of taxes, we expect to actually knocked in a number of revenues again, given the rebound in the economy. We also find that a number of industries that had actually laid off staff, now they are reopening, and therefore we expect that those people who had even those industries that are actually, or the taxpayers who had actually undertaken tax cuts, normal tax cut, employee cuts, are actually going to employ more, and therefore we expect pay as you want to actually come on board. And when it comes to VAT, you will find also that the government is actually undertaking a lot of, like last year we had, our revenue contributors was actually coming from the construction industry, the petroleum industry, as Mr. Cho has actually alluded, and therefore we'll find that this is going to continue. The Big Four agenda is actually being undertaken, and therefore the economy is, we are actually looking at the outlook as far as the economy is concerned, and the kind of the drivers that are going to drive our economy and all, in order to ensure that we actually correct our revenues. And in terms of the consumption taxes, we find the excise duty, you find the bars, the hotels are now opened, and we expect a lot of economic activities. We find the tourism industry, the local tourism that is being the local tourism that is being encouraged to be undertaken by Kenyans, to move all the way to Naivas, to Fash. Talk about the Fash, you even find the issue of the safari rallies and all those kind of things. So actually the government is doing a lot in terms of promoting Kenya, the brand Kenya, and all those kind of things. So we expect from the tourism industry that we are actually going to rebound. Even
yes.
in so far as as far as the economy is concerned, we find there is an outlook that would actually be able to make us to move in that direction. Especially, and then apart from those economic outlook, we actually have also KRA being transformed. You even had Mr. Tomias was saying actually we employed around 1,000 people, but we are not looking at the issue of 1,000. In fact, actually our projected employment for this year alone, over the planned period, we are actually expected to employ over 7,500 to make our employees to move from 7,900 to 14,555. This is because at the moment we are actually understaffed, and therefore the revenues that are out there, we don't have the hands actually to go and look for them. And we expect that with the increase in our workforce, the capacity, we are building capacity, and therefore we expect more and more to visit to our taxpayers, even to encourage them, and also to encourage them, to educate them, to provide education to them for purposes of improving the compliance, as we have already said, because we find enforcement is the way to go, but compliance is the way to go.
Pretty much. Josh, I will just hold on to that in just 1 minute there for Josh, because I just wanted you to have your way in on this, because we're taking a short break. Josh, this figure that we're talking about here, looking at the way the economy is performing in a 2021, KRA, do they have a chance, therefore, to give us that 2 trillion that they have been tasked to give us in 2021 or 2022?
I mean, Mr. Cheriot has made a very strong case, and you know me, Simba, I'm always a skeptic, but I mean, the case is pretty strong, and I think that the economy is bouncing back.
Yes.
So I don't think they'll have a problem with that. And mind you, when I was referring to the last year, my skepticism with the KRA's abilities is only based on that 1 year and celebrating it, and I feel like as though it's being over-celebrated. But if we are assuming this year is a base year, then I think the future is bright, and then now next year we can compare with this year and going forward.
Pretty much. At this time, I would like to thank Mr. Charles Cheriot, who's the manager, KRA Policy and Tax Advisory. Thank you very much for making your time this morning, Mr. Cheriot, and also maybe congratulate you for the salary bonus that you got the other day for surpassing your targets. Probably after this, should take it out for tea. I mean, Tommy, should we go out for tea with Mr. Cheriot?
Yes, we should definitely.
Sounds good. This sounds
bring
good.
my mask.
Yes, I can fit it. Loaded. I can fit it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for making time this morning. We take a short break. Once we come back, we still do have Josh and Tommy in the house. The thing is, NHIF bill, whoa, it is taking twists and turns. Which is the way out for it, because now we do know it is not mandatory for you to contribute the 500 shillings. Your county government should contribute that for you if you are not at the position 2. Once we come back, thank you very much, Mr. Cheriot, for joining us this morning.
Welcome, and thank you very much for having me.